Welcome to another tutorial on importing a character into Super Smash Bros. 64. In a prior video, we looked at creating a high poly model, a model of 320 tries. Well, today we're going to look at creating the second of the three that we need, being the low poly model. If we look at the graph of models we have of the characters that already exist in Smash Bros., you'll see that there is a decent range going from 207 down, but from what you can see, the primary value of a low poly model is almost consistently around 200 tries. That means what we want to do is when we take our model that we created, we have to boil it down to 200 tries. This is important, and this is something you should always be considering when making your model, because if your character is reliant on the higher polys, it's required to have them to function, then the character is not going to work in Smash Bros. 64. You might want to look into brawl modding, for example, so you can utilize the bigger hardware. For Smash 64, our low poly model is going to be 200. If we look at Brian here, we have 273 currently, and we need to get that smaller. Now Brian's model is already pretty low poly, especially considering his high poly model was 273, but we have to get 73 tries eliminated. Now, if we look at it, what can we do? Well, if we remember, in our last guide, we had mentioned about the bane of circles. So anytime you see something that looks relatively circular, there's a good chance we can flatten it out and not really lose anything. Looking at Brian, I can see his head has different components. For example, the hair here is two separate components, and I bet we can merge them together to eliminate some tries. There, look at that. There's a try right there we can get rid of. So let's go in here. We delete that try, and there's another one right there on top. Those are two tries we can get rid of. And since we don't want to have anything weird going on, let's merge. With that, we've begun our journey. We're now 271. Let's see what else we can remove. Let's look at the hair. Looking at the back of his head, we could probably merge these together. Do that at the center. While we are thinking of the model, there's two angles we want to remember. We want to remember the front and how the character is going to look, but we mostly want to worry about their profile. Because it's a 2D fighting game, we're going to be seeing everything on the side. So the side is what we want to try and keep best. And the reason why the back can become a point is because people aren't really going to be staring at the back. And given the colors, it's probably not going to be too noticeable. So I think it's going to be okay. Let's look, is there anything else we can do on his face? I think we probably could merge these cheeks at the center. And I know that's going to adjust his eyes a little bit. We can tweak that. Don't think anyone's going to really notice. And given how close those are together, those probably can get merged as well. We'll do them at the center. We'll definitely have removed the roundness of his face. I think in the long run, people probably won't notice too much. We'll be okay. We can always come back and tweak it. If we look at his body, the body is 71 tries. And I can already see the detail in the shirt and the chest is probably going to be best. If I take this cape, I can remove some of the extra there. And then I'm going to start merging his chest together. But I'll do that in a minute. Given how we are trying to get down to 200, we can do a little bit of math and sort of think about it. His foot here is 10. His leg is 11. His hand is close to 6. His chest right now is at 69, and his head is at 90. how many components do we modify? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. For this model, there are 14 components. Well, that means we want to keep roughly 10 tries per limb, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 12 limbs. It's going to be 120 tries there. That would leave us roughly 40 for the head and 40 for the body, if needed. So the smaller we can make the limbs, the better. Like, for example, let's look at his shoulder. His shoulder is 4 tries. You can't get much smaller than 4. It's basically a pyramid. Same goes for this arm. So we can use those extra tries for the body and the texture in the head. Try and keep them roughly the same. Alright, if we look at the feet here, we can see that it is 11 tries. What I think we can do is we can merge these two verts on the back, shrink it down. Remember, we're looking at the profile view, and doing something like that doesn't look like we're going to be losing much. Most times we're not going to be seeing anything from the back. Alright, now that we've done that, let's see what else can we do. Let's see here. This needs to go in, as well as this piece. I don't really think I see much else we can actually do on this piece. Let's take a look at this foot real quick. We take a look at the foot. We probably can get away with merging some of them together. I do want to keep that bit on the top, but I have a feeling I can probably merge these two together. Merge at center. And if we drag that out a little bit, might work. But this is basically the idea. We're going to go in and we're going to try and merge all of these verts together to shrink it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step away for a second and I'm going to finish off this model and shrink it down to 200 tries. Then after that, I'm going to come back and discuss some of the design choices I made to get this model down to the limit. Then in a subsequent video, I'm going to look at some of the PlayStation models I've been working on importing, because PlayStation models tend to have a lot more tries than that of 64 models. Once that is done, we'll have a general idea and feel for how to take high poly models and shrink them down. Once we have finished with the low poly model, then we're going to look at doing the skeleton, which is great to build off of the low poly model. So I'll be right back. I am back. As you can see, I've made a lot of changes to the Brian model to get it down to 200 tries. If you remember early, the body was rather complicated and the face looked a little chunkier, I would say. But through a lot of vertex merging, I was able to get the model down. Let's take a look at some of the more notable changes. For one thing, you can see the body here has gone under a drastic change. Originally, the bottle was roughly around 70-ish or so tries. But through merge, I was able to take those two parts that had the flap in the front and the nice curvature to it and convert it into a, how big is this? A 10-face tried rectangle. This is for low poly models. We are trying to get 4 of these characters on the screen at once, so we have to make concessions. I also took the feet and I modified them into a point. His cape became 1, 2, 3, 4 tries instead of the 8. And his face has shrunk a little bit because I ended up merging some of the facial components. If we want to see a side-by-side comparison, one thing we can do is we can import the high poly model. Let's see here. And we will drag him back. Good. So here are the two models, side by side. As you can see, the differences between them. Brian definitely was fatter, and his body was definitely more textured. Even his feet had more width to them. But if you look at them side by side, you can't really tell much of a difference. And if you look at them forward, if you're looking hard enough, you can see it. But in general, not much can be noticed or seen on the change, which is good. That's what we want. Since we've done that, why don't we import the character into Smash Brothers? The process is the exact same as it was when it came to importing the high poly character. You want to file, export your FBX. You want to navigate where you're going to put the model. You have to remember to turn off animations and make sure you don't have leaf bones on your armature. You don't want to keep adding those. And then you export your model. Once you've done that, then we want to go to Golden Editor. And in Golden Editor, we're going to go down to Model Editor. We're going to edit Ness and import him. Last time we were looking at this, we had said disable low res model. But since we're making all our models, we don't need to have that option clicked anymore. If you see right here next to the character selection drop-down, we have a drop-down of 3 options: high res, low res, and skeleton. In a prior video, we made high res. We just made our low res, and in a future video, we'll make skeleton. To import the character, it's going to use the exact same textures and special textures mappings that we had created before. If, for whatever reason, you remove or modify your textures, then you're going to generate a new one in the same vein as before. But for Brian, I use the exact same assets, so we don't need to worry about that. I click Import. I navigate to my model. Since this is the high poly model, we're going to go to high poly. We're going to import texture, FBX, special textures. We'll do the normals. You wait for it to do the import. Then we go to low res and we repeat the process. Import, textures. Let's go to the model and special textures. And we have our model in place. Now all we have to do is write our ROM and modify the existing ROM and see how it looks. I'm going to overwrite 1022 here. Then when we go to our emulator, we can see how it looks. Let's open our recent ROM. We'll open 1022.
Free for all! Ness! Leave! Captain Pikachu! Ness! Luigi! Ness! Ness! 3, 2, 1, go!
As you can see here, when you pause, you get a good idea of the high and low poly models together. Notice how my opponent is the low poly model, but when I paused it, they imported the high poly model. That's exactly what we want to see. Looks like I have to fix a dual sided texture issue. We'll cover that later. But this is it. That's how we do it. Now that we have this, the only other model we want to cover is the skeleton model. Once that has been imported, we have all 3 necessary models for our character. Then we want to continue with the tertiary assets, as well as creating a stage, and finally coding and moveset changes. But thank you for sticking with me. Have a good day.